So I think, since we're talking about the sales part of the organization and specifically your role as well, we would love to know, what exactly is RevOps? I am pretty sure a lot of people on the call would have that question. They would have heard the word, but they would like to understand, exactly what goes on under the RevOps umbrella.
So RevOps or revenue operations, as the RevOps, what is the glamorous abbreviation that it follows, has a variety of definitions, right? Depending on who you ask. There's a definition that says that it basically unites all the revenue generating functions under one roof, or supports all the revenue generating functions in one roof. So it's like a mixture of sales op, customer success op, marketing op, and how it sort of serves as a layer between all your GTM functions and your supporting functions like finance, HR, and marketing. So that is definitely one. That how do you make sure that your revenue funnel is not only intact but is also optimized for, and how do you get leverage, process, tools, and analytics to sort of better your place in the market, better service your customers. So there's a lot of definition. Fundamentally, how I like to look at it is that like RevOps is that one function that tries to sort of optimize and in a way influence all the touch points across the customer lifecycle. Right? I mean, so because all the functions that touch your customer at various points of the funnel is something that a true RevOps org tries to optimize and improve on and influence. Right from the very beginning of when you're targeting or generating your demand for the very first time, to making sure how the demand is funneled to relevant teams to service that demand. And then after you've acquired the customer, how do you make sure the customer is serviced properly to ensure retention, to ensure expansion? And when you're doing all of that, you're making sure the customer funnel is intact and is visible. How do you gather some intelligence and inform other orgs which depend on the intelligence, right? Like a product org. How can you enable an efficient product feedback loop? Or how can you enable an efficient marketing loop? So essentially, this is how I personally view revenue operations, is that while everybody is in a way trying to optimize for revenue in one way or the other, but revenue operations per se is sort of marrying your customer and a revenue generating engine to make sure that this join becomes like a strong join, and all the decisions that you take towards this join are data driven and are help you move towards efficiency and hence growth.
Great. So I think you guys are very central to the demand and that revenue collaboration with all the teams throughout the organization.
Yeah.
Perfect. So how did you end up in this role, Vedant? So what led to you deciding that yes, RevOps is probably the right fit?
So essentially, the way it sort of started was that I was during my consulting engagement, I was responsible for building sort of CRM offerings of some of the clients that you're working with, and during that stint, I got a brief chance to interact with sales teams and customer teams, right? And that project and that engagement was primarily how do you leverage technology to fuel your GTM cycle. And when I got to be a part of that, I realized there is so much of the GTM cycle that I was certainly not exposed to. So I was always interested to understand how business is done, like how does business function, how do you grow, how different teams in any organizations come together to move towards a certain objective, and I've always wanted to be at the center of that. Like any one function never piqued my interest. I mean, it did in some point of time, but I wanted to know it all. I would say, like, know the whole cycle, know how every function comes together. That was the curiosity angle that I was, that I had to move towards other opportunities. And then, right when I was sort of figuring out how do I do that, I came across this role at Indeed, where I got a chance to join them as a sales strategy hire to support the India market. And and that was sort of a pivotal moment for me personally, because that made me realize what I would want to do from a career standpoint to the rest of my professional career, and then that exposed me uh, to a world which has literally everything. I think this function has space for everybody, and there's so much that you can do within this. This is the kind of breadth that I was hoping for, and I
Mm.
was, by coincidence or by chance, I was able to sort of, get that in that role, and from there forward.
That's awesome. I think from that perspective, that kind of probably a few people would have a question on their minds on in the group as well. What do you have to maybe study, or what kind of a personality do you need to have to be a part of a RevOps team in an organization? What makes you tick?
So the beauty of RevOps is that all the facets of revenue operation, and there are so many and they are so diverse that it is that the person can in a way be spoiled for choice,
Hmm.
right? But then definitely, before we dive into the deep dive into the vertical function, there are some fundamental traits that any RevOps person should possess. Like excellent stakeholder management skills. Anybody who joins this role needs to deal with a variety of stakeholders who have very different objectives. And so, how do you navigate various stakeholders? How are you able to, uh, build that connect from, being a partner first, then a voice of reason, and then maybe able to influence decision making. You need to travel that journey, and the journey has its own time. So obviously, stakeholder management is key. Problem solving is an absolute basic, right? You need to be able to, because sometimes the problems that any individual gets from as a reverse perspective, they're very broad. They're like one line a statement. Like, hey, you solve for this, but how do you break it down into subsequent elements and then try and solve for it and try and put it all together? So problem solving definitely needs to be a key skill to have. Great, the person needs to be great with numbers. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, any level of professional, numbers is the key. I mean, without numbers, it's very difficult to sort of grow in this field. So definitely a number driven and data driven person. So these are some of the horizontal traits. And if we then deep dive into RevOps pillars, there are a plethora of them. You within RevOps you have sales technology. So if you're somebody into tech, you like implementations, uh, and you like implementations and integrations, and working on very very interesting tech stack. Then then sales technology is the key for you. If you're somebody who wants to
Hmm.
pursue analytics, then sales analytics, customer analytics, marketing analytics, and marketing, then that's the role. If somebody has a thing for operations, right, that they're making sure that all the processes are documented, and that everything is streamlined, then you have various operations within DevOps. You also have an interesting area of sales compensation, right? If you
Hmm.
like to always think about, what makes people take and want to go into compensation modeling and process and all of that, you have sales comp. And then sales strategy. If you want to be like a generalist, want to do a little bit of everything, in a sales strategy role or a sales effectiveness role or a customer effectiveness role, anything, that's the kind. So these are some of the pillars that DevOps has. So as I said, the person is really spoiled for choice as long as they check all the boxes for the horizontal traits and have an interest towards any of the vertical traits. I mean, the doors are open for any of us.
Understood. Understood. I think then the transition, a lot of the traits that you define are kind of the traits that you need in a consultant as well. So I think that transition worked out just perfect for you overall.
Yeah, I mean, and if you see this role and how this journey has had this role as well, right? I mean, initially, a lot of folks in this role was new. Initially, we had a lot of folks who were primarily coming from GTM backgrounds. You had some
Hmm.
people coming from sales or customer success or SDRs who were transitioning into this role. And as this role evolved and started to show more value, then and consultants are basically able to fit anywhere. That's the beauty
Hmm.
of it, right? And,
Yeah.
and that is where and that is where a lot of consultant work was also made their way to taking up these roles and expanding it further. So you got it bang on, Ankit. I think there's a lot of parallels in between a skill that a consultant owns versus somebody in RevOps should own, and that's why you'll see a transition from a consultant to revenue operations is usually, I'll not say easy, but can look like an organic one.
Mm.
But it's definitely open to every other role as well.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So and then uh, the RevOps team within an organization, right? So within the hierarchy of the organization, how is it placed? I do understand, the stakeholders that you have to interact with, but how does your organizational hierarchy looks like within your team, and then where are you placed in the organization as well?
Usually, and there are varying schools of thought, right? That put
Mm,
RevOps here and there. A revenue operations functions in an organization can either report to, can either be in the CEO's office or the CRO's office or in the CFO. These are the three main areas in the revenue operations system. Everything has its merits and demerits.
mm,
Uh, Essentially, whenever the organization is reporting to the CRO, they are very close to people who do the business, very closer to sales and GTM team. And so your prime stakeholder is the closest to you, and you try and solve for them. And
mm,
you sort of understand their pain in a little bit more detail, right? Uh, when this organization is within the CAFO bucket, then you have a very good handle of cost. You're able to plan better. So you're also, whenever you're sort of trying at building or trying and optimizing for your GTM functions, you try and do them by going towards operating leverage. You strive for operational efficiency, and you always try and marry cost and profitability, and to be exposed to other aspects of the business as well. Within the the CEO function, I mean, you sort of, in addition to everything, there's also, you get exposed to the long-term vision of the
mm,
organization, right? A strategic element sometimes comes into the picture, and so how the GTM team needs to be structured to sort of achieve the overall organization goals. Um, and so each bucket has its own, as I said, introduces its own ways in which the RevOps team functions. But typically, if you see, regardless of where the RevOps function sits, it's
mm.
CEO, CRO, or CFO, they're always trying to optimize for revenue efficiency. And they're always trying to optimize for analytics addition. It's just that the perspective changes a little bit. So in one, so and the pillars of revenue operations mostly stay intact. You have sales technology, analytics, sales strategy, and sales comm. These pretty much stay the same. And you can have sales ops, CS ops, marketing ops. But the perspective and what are you trying to optimize for depends on the large organization where you sit. And these are basically the options that the current RevOps functions that are sitting. Um, and that is where organization, when you have a RevOps function, sometimes you don't have a RevOps function, and sometimes you have a sales ops analyst or a success ops analyst or a marketing ops analyst. And in this case, when you don't have a centralized function, then these supporting roles sit within the core function, right? So you have a sales ops analyst supporting sales, you have marketing operations analyst supporting marketing, and the functions sit there. But when you do have a central global revenue operations function, they roll into any of the three heads that I spoke about.
So I think uh, from the perspective that you shared, so wherever the RevOps team sits is kind of also defined on the kind of the organization as well, right? So do you feel like it might change with industry, or it might change with with basically the life cycle of the organization? If it's in its infancy, or if it's a very big organization, does that also affect where the team would sit?
Historical trends have, I mean, maybe, I mean, if you were to really think about it, it might make sense, or at the most infancy, at the initial stages, when the CEO span of control is almost everything, this function might report into the CEO, but as the organization expands and you need to really draw clear lines, you need to hire other leaders. At that point of time, you might think about, whether you want to bucket DevOps into a CFO function or a CEO or a CRO function, right?
Hmm.
And it depends on a variety of reasons, right? Sometimes long-term CEOs take up some other role. Sometimes they want to lead product and strategy and vision. In that case, revenue operations or RevOps sometimes goes with the CEO bucket. or on the operating rhythm, right? Maybe it can be I hypothesize, and we can try and figure it out by looking at this data point that does it make sense for DevOps to sort of sit within the CEO at the initial stages, and then as the organization expands, move into a CFO and a CRO, and the choice between whether it should sit within the CFO or the CRO also in a way is a function of scale, right? Because if you have a very, very large sales team, right, and you have like a global sales team spreading across regions, and then maybe a CRO hierarchy scores just 1 or 2 points over the CFO, but then it's very difficult to really distinguish between the two, right? So I think between the other two, the choice really depends upon the stage that the organization is in. Like, are they prioritizing rapid growth? Are they prioritizing profitability? They're trying to prioritize both. What does the product mix look like? What does market penetration look like? There can be an argument that, when I need to go and expand into a few more markets at that time, it might be a CRO function, but more when my market penetration has reached a certain level, and when I want to go towards operating leverage, then it might become a CFO function. Right. So again, I think a variety of factors does need to come into consideration for us to make that choice. But that is strictly my point of view. This is what I think. Obviously, the beauty of DevOps is everybody has very diverse point of views. But I think this is probably something that we can think about when placing the role in the EOC bucket.
Makes sense. And do you also think that within the life cycle of the organization, can you define that when an organization, it doesn't matter whether they have a RevOps team or not at a certain point, or at some point it becomes kind of optional, and then at one point it becomes mandatory, right? So can you kind of define that at what stages, when should an organization have a RevOps team, and it becomes kind of imperative for them to have one?
So, and what my history, what my experiences have taught me is that the moment you're starting a sales function, or the moment you're setting up a sales, when you're thinking about setting up a sales function, a marketing function, a sales function, you start setting up a RevOps function at the very same time, right? Because at that time, your processes and your tools from the very beginning are built in a way so that they scale with your business. They keep pace. Because if you don't, and then one can argue that, does the revenue of the business at that point of time justify the cost of a function? And the answer can be the function doesn't have to be a full stack function at that point of time. The function can be you have a few generalists in the team who are just sort of there and observing and setting the processes. But I'm a strong believer that it should be set up at the very, very beginning when you're setting up a GTM and in conjunction to that. Because what happens is that the moment an organization scales, and if the right processes and the right structures are not put in place in the middle, sometimes it can happen that you can grow so fast without the right processes, and then at the later stages, it becomes very difficult, sort of to implement any process or to set up a structure when the organization has grown to a certain level.
Okay, understood.
And
how should you stop this team? Sorry, please go ahead. Please finish.
Yeah, so the thought that I was completing is that, if you look at the typical challenges the revenue operations person usually deals with, and they try and solve for revenue forecasting and predictability, CRM adoption, tech adoption, enablement, and a bunch of other things. Now, if the right practices are set up from the very beginning, the inertia to set up these practices later becomes lesser. But if you scale an organization and it become very big, then obviously think about teaching. You have a batch of 10 students, and you teach them and they become well, and then they train 10 more, and eventually it's an organic process. But all of a sudden you have to teach 100 students, and then they're not students anymore. They are the people who are used to working in a certain way. So it becomes difficult to sort of drive for adoption and predictability. And to your question that you were asking, how should you start? So, and again, various ways to do it, right? One very common way is you start with technology. You start with you try and set up your tech stack from the very beginning. When you say tech stack, your CRM, your marketing automation tools,
Mhm.
maybe your enablement tools, or maybe it can come later, your sales comm tool, the absolute basic things that you need to keep a business running. Because there are, and if you look at the business, you have your basic business practices, and then you have uh, enhancement functions. Right? For example, uh, a sales rep has to be paid, no doubts.
Mm.
So compensation becomes very, very key. You need to understand how your customer are engaging with your platform. You need to understand how their touchpoints are being recorded. CRM becomes absolutely a key. But enablement, when you talk about enablement and outreach, maybe they are the step number two. Once you have set up the basics, then you sort of go on to the enablement journey. So I think one way, usually how I've seen it all, they start with a tech. You usually start with somebody into technology, try and set up
Mm.
this tech stack from the very scratch. Maybe a compensation person in the beginning to make sure
Yeah.
your comp structure are sorted, uh, and a general analytics function within it, right?
Got it.
Because you need to be able to put those KPIs and frameworks to assess performance and effectiveness from the very beginning as well. And,
Mm.
and and this needs to obviously this evolves with scale. That thing evolves with scale. So I think these can be some very, very basic functions that you can start with. Now, as the organization grows, then these functions again, within functions can grow within itself, right? And then you can think about having a dedicated team for sales ops or for customer. Once these teams become bigger,
Mm.
you can think about having a dedicated sales ops function, a customer success ops function, a marketing ops function,
Yeah.
and you can think about expanding your tech team, tech stack as well. But I think at the very initial stages, somebody from tech, from analytics, and compensation can be a very good start. And then as you expand, depending on the priorities, you can figure out how do you want to diversify into other functions, or further expand this tree.
Makes sense. And any specific niche roles that you've seen in RevOps teams that you generally don't see elsewhere?
So, I mean, that's an interesting question. Technically, I've seen sales compensation.
Yeah.
It's that one niche, right? That I've seen DevOps function, because to structure a sales comp or
Mm.
a sales comp plan is
Mm.
very different from anything, because there are so many levers that are there with you at play,
Mm.
right? You need to think about structure, you need to think about compliance, you need to think about your commissions framework, you need to think about, and then you need to be able to do profitability, you need to think about process and governance. So this is one function that owns the design of the plan,
Mm.
execution of the plan, and improvement of it, and becomes the most critical functions of
Mm.
all. Because without this, this is one function which comes at the center of of ensuring that the teams are motivated, and the teams are sort of right on time. Uh, and apart from that, I think sales technology is also evolving to be a very, very niche function, because these are folks who are experts in these tech domains, right? Somebody is a marketing
Yeah.
automation, somebody is a HubSpot expert, somebody is a Salesforce expert, somebody is an
Mm.
Anaplan expert,
Mm.
right? Uh, and Sorry, I think my network is a little hazy. Yeah. So these are also, so you have these experts in these various automation tools, or tools that are also coming up to as a niche role within the technical domain. And I think analytics is you have a fit, right? Anybody who's doing analytics is
Mm.
basically
Got it.
can fit in there. But I think about it deeply, these are two niches that
Okay.
I have seen observed in the RevOps area.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Uh, and and what are the planning processes that you guys get involved in? So obviously one part is the demand generation, the demand planning, where the revenue actually comes from. Are there any other planning processes in the organization that you guys are a key part of?
And so it all starts with, I say, like the complete business planning. Usually, how it comes up together.
Mm.
And when you talk about business planning, you talk about everything. And you talk about obviously your revenue planning. Then the revenue also informs your headcount and your team planning. And in addition to that, it also informs your territory planning, where in which market you should be, what account kind of talk you are talking to, etc., etc. Then your territory planning and your revenue planning informs marketing planning, or as you say, demand gen planning, right? Like what kind of funnel, what kind of inbound, what kind of activity, what kind of campaign should you run to meet your goals, etc., etc. Right? Then your revenue is done, your marketing is done, and basically the headcount, and there's a little bit of cost planning as well. That sort of comes into the picture to make sure that, like figuring out investing in the right reason. In certain cases, I've also seen a lot of planning happening on pricing, right? Because sometimes revenue operations teams also have a stake at the table in terms of informing the pricing strategy that we have. So how do you price the products better, and how do you price them in a way to sort of help gain some leverage in the market? So think about it in this way, right? So any organization has an annual planning cycle.
Correct.
And DevOps is one of the very key stakeholders, sort of, the person at the center who makes sure the planning cycle comes together. And in a way, in some cases, really the driver's seat of the planning cycle.
Makes sense. And what are the latest trends within your field, right? What are the new either in operations or through technology? What are the latest things that by which basically if you're not following that, you're left behind?
So two more things, right? I think one thing has to be AI. If somebody says new and it can't say AI, then it can't be like a complete answer. But it has to be AI. That's one. But a very interesting trend that is also coming up, and which I'm seeing, is that if you look at the sales tech or the GTM tech piece, that piece has blown off, has really blown up in the last 4-5 years. You basically have an offering for everything, for everything that you do. Like you have a plethora of options for CRM, you have a plethora of options for marketing automation and sales outreach and sales enablement and then sales com. You have a lot, and then you have on top of that you have SaaS platforms supporting these SaaS platforms, and then you have data warehousing solutions to sort of connect your data and everything. So you have a lot of the tech space has really exploded. And now, while at one point of time, we were thinking about how do we get more tech as much as possible to help us optimize our processes. But now the narrative is quickly shifting. How do we get the right tech? And how do we make our tech stack more lean, more interconnected, and we get the maximum value for the investments that we are making. The conversations of ROI for the tech that we are now implementing they are really taking a more center stage as they're opposed to. It's not that easy to sort of go and buy a tech tool now as it was some time ago. And obviously, your macroeconomic factors are really also needs to be at play. But what has also shown folks is that while you have a bunch of tools, driving adoption and usage and integration and implementation for these tools is still a challenge. And it's a challenge that any DevOps professional usually fights very, very often. So how do you build? And this is a trend that I'm really seeing evolve. Right? Like how do you make sure that your tech stack? You need to have the basics, but if you're going a little away from the basics, you think a little more about the value of it than it was earlier. And how do you make it more cost effective?
What are the must-haves in your tech stack then? What are the must-haves?
I mean, you obviously, as I said, a CRM, a marketing ops tool, and a sales form tool. I would take the basics. Definitely need to have. Then then obviously things in the forecasting and planning category, right? Yeah. Sales outreach and enablement, things that help you with conversational AI, fundamentally, right? I think these are the other areas that you should sort of look after that. But only after you have the things sorted, because your CRM is where everything is based on. Every tool that you implement needs to talk to it, and it needs to sort of, you need to really get that right, the most basic thing. And then the way you build upon your forecasting cadences, and the way you make for your forecasting process informs how better you implement your planning and forecasting tools,
Hmm.
right? And then using that, you try and figure out how do you improve for enablement, and how do you improve for the kind of messaging that you have. That's
Hmm.
where outreach enablement tool comes in. But yeah, from a tech style perspective, I think these are some buckets that I personally feel one should have a solution in, and keep trying and looking for a new solution and see what really fits your goals.
Got it. Got it. Makes sense. And I think with tech, once you start collecting so much data, and then the fact that everything becomes so available to you, I think your analytics and the KPIs keep on evolving as well, right? So maybe become even more challenging. So within RevOps, if we had to understand, what are the key KPIs that you guys measure yourself against, and what are the analytics that you guys have?
So usually, what we try and look at, I mean, the number one thing that comes to me is forecasting or revenue productivity or forecasting accuracy. Am I able to forecast my business better? And how accurately am I able to forecast my business? And that's one. Second is operational efficiencies, right? The time it takes for me to do a certain task. Am I able to pay my folks faster? Am I able to inform? Am I able to churn insights faster than used to? Right. So again, operating efficiency across, and even to solve for operating efficiency. Like, if in your sales process, you have various stages, and various checks that need to happen for any client to move from stage A to stage B. How do you make sure they move those bottlenecks? Are you able to make the sales cycle quicker or shorter or easier, right? And in that, are you able to sort of, not only are you able to make it shorter and quicker, or rather more predictable, but are you also able to identify your right customer? So, defining your ICP and customer segmentation and territory planning, right? How effective
Right.
are you able to do that? Are you able to find the right customer? Are you able to optimize for the lifetime value? Are you able to reduce your churn? So again, some of these are business metrics that the team and tries to introduce various processes and analytics frameworks to first measure and like observe, measure, and then inform on. And within DevOps, if you are like, what should a DevOps function be judged against? How many processes has the function has the function introduced? And what kind of like, and the impact of these processes. And as I said, am I getting better at forecasting my business? Am I able to reduce churn? Am I able to reduce the amount of time it takes for a sales rep to ramp? And am I able to reduce my ramping time? Am I able to reduce the amount of time it takes for me to process my compensation? Am I able to reduce the number of exceptions that I get from? So each process that you own, are you able to do it better, faster, quicker, and more accurately? So you need to have a metric KPIs for all of the processes that you own to try and see, are you being efficient? So operational efficiency has to be at the center, for any level of function.
Perfect. Great. And as in terms of we talked about forecast accuracy, and another thing that we talked about, as per the latest trends, that AI is the thing
Yeah.
that everyone wants to talk about. Now, how have you seen Gen AI or machine learning for forecasting, for that matter? How does that fit into RevOps? What are the trends that you've seen with Gen AI first, and then we can talk about ML as well.
So essentially, what I've seen is that both between ML and Gen AI, I feel that now you can think about solving for productivity and predictability in a variety of ways. And I think that is where Gen AI, in my opinion, plays the most crucial role. It's solving for the two P's, right? When I talk about productivity, am I, because if you see, uh, almost everybody is using some kind of a SaaS platform or some kind of a platform, right? So it's very difficult to turn a customer away from something else to something. So the way that I'm reaching out to a customer needs to be personalized. It needs to be engaging, right? So I have seen a lot of Gen AI solutions who are helping me draft the right outreach, who are able to predict the kind of amount of time it takes for me to contact a customer in order to secure a meeting, right? So redefining and reimagining customer engagement and customer outreach, I think GenAI has a fantastic application in that. Right? Also, when you bring in the concept of conversational AI, now you have your sales folks talking to a variety of customers, and then sometimes to figure out where the problem is, you went into a meeting and you spoke to a customer, and a lot of things were discussed. And then earlier, in the old man days, you had a diary next to you to transcribe notes, and you could note down key topics and go back and see what it was all about. With conversational AI, I come out of the meeting and I'm exactly told, what my action items are, what I need to respond on. So the amount of time that it takes for to again, the time it takes to respond to the proposal has reduced drastically. Even I've seen, solutions which are directly, sort of integrated into my whole RFP process. The amount of time it takes for me to respond to an RFP, can I reduce that? There are solutions that are able to reduce the time it takes for legal screenings. Right? Am I able to vet the legal document better? Because in a way, I'm able to suggest changes. Like if you in the earlier days, it still exists, right? Your client wants certain clauses. It goes to the legal team. The legal team is definitely very busy and overloaded. It takes a week or two to come back to you to suggest yes or no. But now we see all of that. The time is being consumed very, very less, and ML is more at play there at Gen AI. But in my case, I'm not really separating them two together, but really bucketing them in terms of engagement, the productivity by this piece of it. Now, when you talk about predictability, that is more of a machine learning game, because clients, we have right now at some point of time the focus was how do I grow more, but I feel now it is shifting to how do I retain more. How am I able to retain, or rather the focus was acquire more, and now it's how do I retain more. So am I able to identify signals that enables me to predict churn? Do I know which of the clients is at a more risk of churning out than the other, right? Or which client has a better growth potential or more growth potential, or which has sort of checked the boxes, right? And am I tapping into the client better? That is one. And second, the probability of me converting a deal based on different touch points that I have. What is the propensity? What is the probability that the client would buy from me based on various interactions that they have, and which involves recording the touch point that the client has had with me across various engagement cycles, and then try and figure out, okay, hey, the probability of the client working with you is X or Y. So I think in the predictability, whether it is predicting your churn, predicting your acquisition, predicting your revenue, ML, like machine learning has played a very key role, and across the planning tools and across the automation tools that I've seen, this is where a lot of these, the edge is really coming out. Are we able to predict growth, churn, and acquisition? So that is how I see solving for predictability and productivity across Gen AI and machine learning.
Makes sense, and obviously churn becomes kind of a key over there. So what are the data points that you think are key to predict churn? Let's say, have you kind of identified that, or what could tell you that?
That's the kind of thing I'm usually paid for. but so essentially the things that I've tried out in the past, right? I mean, like how, and depends on what you're selling. Let's talk about software for a moment. I think product utilization and product adoption is really one thing that really comes to me with in terms of churn, because say let's take like and I am going to somebody I work with in Indeed used this analogy and I loved it, so I'm going to repeat it, right? So think of you're working with a bank, you have a bank account. The more products you have with the bank, the less likely you are to leave, right? You have a bank, you'll have a saving account, you'll have a loan account, you'll have a credit card account, you might have a personal loan, you have ABC. Now the more products you take from the bank, the more engaged you are, or the longer you stay. And you will take these products from the bank because they are quicker to get. The service is great, the performance is awesome, and how the bank is able to expand its revenue is because they are predicting, how are you using your credit card, what is the transaction value in your bank account, and everything, right? So from their angle, they are looking at the usage of their products across various segments, and then trying and figure out, okay, which customer is more likely to churn versus something else. All of a sudden, say your transaction, you have somebody who has a salary account and your salary has not been credited for 3 or 4 months. The bank can figure out, okay, hey, is this person deciding to move, or has he already moved? So I think, and if we draw the same with SaaS, like how often, how am the client using my product? How many features are they using? How frequently are they using? Are they customizing it? What's the breadth of it and depth of it? I think product adoption and usage really comes at the center of predicting churn.
Understood.
And second is, the kind of value that my product suite is bringing to the client. If I am someone that sells a solution for, scanning documents per se, now that has a ceiling. I'll only scan X many documents. But the moment I don't need documents, I need to evolve. I need to do something else, right? So that brings to how am I able to pivot, or rather add more offerings to my bucket to make it more easier for the client to give me multiple touch points. I think that is true. Second, in addition to product, what are my service touch points looking like? How often am I reaching out to the client? How often am I reviewing the business with him? How often am I reviewing the deals with him? I have seen cases where in organizations, sometimes the sales or CS rep do not meet their clients for years. Right? And I've even seen cases where, there's a review every week or every month. So how am I engaging with the client, and how frequently am I engaging with the client? And then how do you strike the balance between engagement, between an SMB and an enterprise client? Right? So again, utilization and adoption, your presence, your depth, and engagement across different GTM channels. These are some things that I think should come into the picture when predicting or trying to predict churn.
Makes sense. I think I've asked quite a bit of questions, and I see a bunch of questions coming up in the chat as well. I'd like to cover those as well, since we are very close to 6 already. But I'll just take the chat questions right away. Sonali was asking, are there any common misconceptions about RevOps that you've seen?
So there is a thought that says that RevOps is basically sales ops. That is one. Usually, that's how people draw a parallel. It is and it is not. Sales ops is like, in my opinion, sales ops falls under the bucket of RevOps, what we spoke about. Sales is one GTM function, not the only GTM function in the organization. And RevOps sort of, in a way, supports and addresses every GTM function in the organization. So while in certain cases they are used interchangeably, most in cases they are not. They are not the same. It's very two similar but different practices.
Got it. Makes sense. Yeah. Jeevan has a question where he was asking, is RevOps more of a support function for sales, marketing, and customer success?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Right? But that depends on how you look at support. Because support, can be proactive and reactive, can be operational and strategic, or can be both. Right? So it is sometimes, it is perceived as a function that just solves for operational challenges or just services data needs. It depends on how you play the role. If you are able to predict the trends better and able to help these functions get ahead of the game, then that enables you to become a strategic partner. But if you're always prioritizing, hey, how do I solve this ticket, or how do I service this data request, then you're just somebody who's sort of solving tickets and giving data. So again, the kind of support that you give, proactive or reactive, or both, strategic or operational, or both, depends on the relationship, and then that defines, or it's definitely a support function. But then
Makes
how
sense.
you support is the key here.
Exactly. There's one question from Hema in here where she's saying, within RevOps, obviously data is everything. So what are the challenges that you face in terms of, the different teams working in silos?
So I think the first challenge is transparency or visibility. Sometimes my sales folks do not know what CS is working on, CS does not know what sales is working on, marketing does not know what both of these teams are working on, and both of these teams don't know what marketing is working on, right? So how do you make sure how do you enable a seamless handshake across these teams? How do you make sure that because these are all TTM functions, right? They know your client in one way or the other. You need to build on those insights and then develop a process and help execute strategies that help you to expand more, grow more, acquire more, right? So how do you solve for transparency? How do you make sure these functions interact with each other or build those avenues for interaction? That's one. Second, data standardization. Because now you have so many tools coming into the system. You have a CRM solution and you have some other solution, marketing ops, and you have some other solution. Sometimes they don't talk to each other. A customer in your CRM is a sub customer B in your marketing ops tool for something else. So how do you make sure data is standardized and is consumable across these functions? And third, how do you present that data? See, it is very, very, and that is not only for these three, right? That is the one thing that you can either present the data in an Excel sheet, or it can be 3 lines, or can be both. Because presenting data is definitely a key. But it's the message is how are you able to drive and show the right kind of insights. So making sure the kind of data that you present to these teams, it's in alignment with what their objectives are. It helps them. Why should they care about your data? That's the question that you should ask while working with these 3 teams.
Perfect. Great. And I think that there's a commonality between the last question between Urushi and Arpita. So what are the core components of a successful RevOps strategy, and what are some of the strategies used to ensure that all the departments are working towards a common goal?
So again, see, first one is definitely automation, right?
Correct.
I mean, you need to solve for consistent flow of data. You need to solve for consistent recording of all the client touch points, because that is what leverages analytics, and that is what sort of further enables data-driven decision making. So automation and tech adoption is definitely one. Second, operational efficiencies. The amount of time it takes for business to happen, the amount of time it takes for your sales person to get ramped up and sell, the amount of time it takes your customer success rep to respond to a need, the amount of time it takes for your marketing team to plan or acquire a certain customer or optimize your channels. So definitely it needs to come down operational efficiency. Third, growth. So how do you unlock growth, right? And that comes about by planning your market better, planning the ICP better, making sure that your ICP is engaged, make sure your TAM is defined clear, make sure it is planned in a way so that it gets proper attention from all your GTM teams, and make sure that you're able to record and measure those interactions and attend interactions to making sure to where the problem is. So that and then in addition to growth, answering questions like just help answer questions. How can we grow more, or how can we stay at the current pace? So definitely growth is the third thing, and essentially these are the only 3 things that I think should be the fundamental pillars, right, for RevOps. There can be a lot of other, like there can be enablement, but these 3 I would bet my money on.
Great. Perfect. I think we're right. I think that's all the questions that we had. So first of all, Vedant, let me thank you for a very insightful session. I mean, I quite now understand a lot more about RevOps. I think we've had a couple of conversations before, but I think this has been very, very, very helpful. And I think a lot of the questions were answered as well. So thank you so much, Vedant, for taking our time for us. And we're looking forward to staying in touch with you. And we'll reach out to you. And then again, I'd like to thank you for on behalf of the complete Polestar team.
Thank you, Ankit. Thanks for having me here. It was great having this conversation with you, and definitely would like to keep in touch. And thanks for everybody for attending as well. I hope that everybody had a great session.
Perfect. Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Adant. Have a great day. Yeah.
You too.